Okay, if you're ready, you can start the presentation.
Yes, hello, Chair, and hello, everyone. We are from Group 1, and we represent the World Economic Outlook. We will present about the World Economic Outlook. And here are our group member have many. Yes. Yes, move to the content. Yes, here is our content. There are 9 parts. Yes. So now we will move to the next part. The first part. Yes, divergent recoveries and amid high uncertainty. Yes, as we know, the pandemic has been occur since the end of 2019 until now. It's still not completely under control. And yes, there are many vaccines have been produced, but at the same time, the virus also continue to develop itself into new variants. So now we have confirmed that there are 4 variants already, and many countries and many sectors have also recover, but some are still highly affected. And we cannot wait to recover economy after we can completely cure the pandemic. But we need to have great economic policy to deal with this uncertainty. Just please move to the next part. Yes, second part is the pandemic continue to exact severe human toll. Yes, in fact, we cannot predict when the world can recover from this COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the economy, since there are since many countries have divergence in dealing with the pandemic. It means the pandemic affect the country differently, and it's also depend on their measure and their capacity in healthcare. Yes. A multi-speed incomplete recovery. Yes, it refers to the divergent speed in recovery of the countries in the world, and many sectors have not completely recovered from the COVID-19. And point number 1 is differences across countries. Yes. Yes, after, because of the COVID-19, the countries that depend more on the tourism and commodity export are severely affected, because and some of them can only impose more restriction if they are lack of healthcare capacity to cure their own people. So they need to enhance restriction, and so that's why it's highly affect their economy. And for the country that most rely on industrial teleworkable job, digital infrastructure, they are less affected. Their economy are less affected. Yes, and yes, the divergence between this country will continue to occur if we cannot beat the pandemic completely. Yes, and there are also divergence across sector, such as industrial production for working from home. Since now there is pandemic, people cannot go to physical work and study, so the demand for the production, such as laptop or something else, it will be increased. So that's why the industrial production, uh, is booming at this time. And some, on the other hand, some factors such as service factor and the tourism, it cannot be recover if the pandemic is not under control. Let's move to the next slide. Yes, and about the international trade, up until now, the trade has already started to operate normally, except the cross-border trade in services. And for labor market and vulnerabilities, the labor market is also highly affected from the COVID-19. Yes, and many people have lost their job. That's why some country has implemented policies to assist in the labor market, such as the job retention programs and wage subsidies, unemployment rate, wage subsidies. And despite this help from the government, the unemployment and underemployment are still high. Yes, please move to the next slide. The divergence between asset market and the rest of the economy. Yes, compared to labor market and the products market, asset market still going well due to policy stimulus and the increase of vaccination by the end of this year. And the support on financial are crucial for the recovery, but the divergence of the country economy expectation can raise financial stability risk. For the divergence within country give rise to higher inequality. It means the uncertainty has negatively affected the unemployment and income among workers. And we can see that women and low skill workers are badly suffers in most of their jobs related to contact intensive services and informal sector. And this situation applies to both advanced country and developing countries. Further, this pandemic also uh, it affect low income country greater than the high income country, because in low income country there are many poor people and they cannot have full access for online education. That's why if continue if the pandemic continue longer, it will lead to income inequality in the future. Yes. And please move to number 3. Yes, unprecedented policy or action prevent far worse outcome. And the first point is the fossil swift global policy response. Yes, this point they talk about the help of the government and central bank policy to prevent the cost by the pandemic, such as the central bank, they provide liquidity and credit extension to its borrowers, while the government has uh, supported by providing wage subsidies, liquidity support, unemployment insurance, and nutrition assistance. Yes, and the next part, the last point, missions not accomplished yet. At this point, according to IMF staff, they think that the automatic stabilizer, discretionary measure, and financial sector measure contribute to the global growth global economic growth around 6% in 2020. And yes, and despite of this measure, the unemployment and underemployment remain high than the pre-pandemic. Yes, and that is the big challenge for the policymaker to deal with this uncertainty. Yes, that's all from my point. Let's move to the next presenter.
Thank you, Samnang, for your presentation. And I'm sorry because my internet is a bit slow. So in case you cannot hear me, please let me know. So moving on to my point about the outlook, emerging divergence, and challenge of for policy. So the current shock that we have within 2020 and 2021 is is out of the way that economists have been predicted. So this in this has really impacts the policy development to other phase, such as the path of the pandemic, the policy actions, the evolution of financials, the condition of commodity and price, and also the capacity of the economy to adjust of health related implement to the activity. So the up and based on this policy, the up and down of this policy is the driver that has different interactions to each country based on country's specific character, and it also determines how country is able to recover their economy from this pandemic and also their development. So firstly, about the uneven access to vaccine. So um, it has been known that the vaccinations distribution won't be events across the region. And so for the country with advanced economy, it is expected to be contributed by summer of 2021, while the other country is expected to be contributed by 2022. So with this vaccine deployment, it will stagger across the region, and with the country that receive as much vaccine as they could, their economic will be recover faster, because um, it will help release their lockdown, and their 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 country economic could be back to uh, the way they used to be. And also, based on the graph that on your right hand side, you can see that within the early of 2020, around like second quarter, there's many countries that had less mobility during the COVID, but in another phase during the last quarter of 2020, we can see on the graph that many country economics start getting better by then. So that's regarding to the vaccines distribution. And another one is the differentiate in physical support. So physical support is really important during this pandemic. Why? So we can say that in the United States and also Japan, they have a very strong physical support. So when the pandemic happens, they're able to support their country by example, in the United States, they have the Biden's administration's fiscal package where they can contribute to stabilize their economic, and at the same time they can contribute to any factor that is lack of thanks to their tax. But on the other hand, country with less fiscal support has a very limit in terms of economic management, because those countries are likely to be in debt more than those advanced economic countries. Another point is about broadly supportive financial conditions. So the baseline assumes that the monetary system will remain accommodative and tighten only gradually as recovery takes hold. And by this, the economic emerging country as well as the policy framework will be important. So as long as their country has a strong policy framework, their country will be able to recover from the crisis faster. And about the rise of commodity price, we know that during this COVID pandemics, there's a lot of project globally. So in terms of traveling for medical supplies or anything else, because like there's a lot of things going on for that require traveling. even though there's a lockdown, but traveling is still needed. So the oil price has been grown by 30% in 2021, and so the price the price start increasing from OPEC, and largely this impact is it rebounds from China. So the food the the price of the food is expected to be pick up for this year after the while, because since the oil price increased, everything that has influenced by the oil will also be increased. So that's it for my part. Moving on to another part.
So, good evening, lecturers, and hello, everyone. Now I'm going to present you about the fifth part, which is diverging path GDP below pre-pandemic projections. So after an estimated contractions or declines of 3.3% in 2020 for global economic, they figure out that there are persistent damage across both advanced and emerging market countries. So in advanced economy, regional restriction will likely be necessary at time to restrain the progressions of new strain of the virus. If the vulnerable population gets vaccinated, so contact intensive or the high contact activity are expected to resume and will be recovered soon within the group of advanced economy country. However, in the United States, it's predicted that they will return to the end of 2019 level. This level means that the level that health shock hit intensely for since the first time. So the United States will be hit intensely by the COVID-19 in the first half of 2021 from January to June. And then Japanese is also predicted that will be hit intensely in the second half from July to December in 2021 as well. And another one is in the Euro area. The Euro area consists of those member states of the European Union that have adopted the euro as the currency. With the United Kingdom, activity is expected to be okay or resilient in 2022. So the gap of those countries that hit by the virus can be traced back to their leader behavior to protect the public health response to infections, and the leader should be more flexible and adaptive to their economic activity, respond to the low mobility, and to remove rule or law that not effective to the crisis. Next slide, please. So with the respect of the October 2020 WEO World Economic Outlook projections or predicts for 2021 have been revised down in Europe and up in Japan and the United States. As Delia mentioned, that because these two countries has the additional fiscal support legislated in both countries at the end of 2020. So, for example, as you can see in the slide, that the Biden administration $1.9 trillion dollars rescue package is expected to further boost GDP over 2021 to 2022 with significant to main U.S. trading partner from in European country such as Italy, Portugal, or Spain, and other countries. Next slide, please. Okay, so in emerging market and developing country, for this country, vaccine procurement data suggests that effective protection will remain unavailable for most of the population in 2021. So lockdown and containment measure may be needed more frequently in 2021 and 2022 than in advanced economy. And it also increasing the medium-term scarring. The medium-term scarring here mean that the negative long-term effect on the potential output of this country as well. So there is also considerable differences that expected between China and tourism-based economic country as well. For China, as you can see in the slide, that they have effective containment measure as well as the forceful public investment response that have facilitated in the country to have a strong recovery. However, for tourism-based economy, particularly face slow normalization of cross-border travel. So those countries need to rethink based on how to deal with the death toll in the severity of the pandemic, economic structure that prioritize employment and GDP shares of contact-intensive sector, and how to deal with the sudden economic shock. And should find more effectiveness of policy response to combat the fallout as well. Next slide, please. Hello, next, yes. Okay, so for here is my last slide that we're talking about in Latin American and the Caribbean. So the countries in this they sank to the global manufacturing rebound in the second half of 2020 that growth exceeded expectations in some large exporting countries in the region. For example, Argentina, Brazil, and Peru that are bringing the 2021 forecast to 4.6%. However, for some countries such as Chad, Costa Rica, and Mexico, these countries have not secured enough vaccines to cover their population. Moreover, in 2021, projections for the tourism-dependent Caribbean economic country has been revised down by 1.5 percentage point to 2.4%. Yeah, so it is all of my part. I would like to invite another teammate to continue.
So here is the point number 6 is just mostly inflation pressure to remain contained in most countries, right? So usually what is point here in the book, they refer to subdued inflation. So what is subdued inflation? And according to the book, subdued inflation reflects the development in the labor market, where wage remains low and less bargaining power for workers because of the stagnant growth and in output of the economy. Actually, most market participants generally expect subdued inflation in advanced economies. However, we can also see that there is also a subdued inflation kind of taking place in some emerging market as well. Like even though some central banks have embarked on asset purchases, right? But those actions have not had any effects on the or any increase in inflation. And there are some possible reasons for that, which include maybe credible monetary policy frameworks, communication, or support in market functioning and consistent with price stability mandates. However, there are also closer looks that in the book they kind of identify or use some method to measure the subdued inflation. So and the first method they kind of use is that the 3-min inflation. I'm not sure if it's a method or not, but this what they use to kind of measure how is that. So what is 3-min inflation, right? 3-min inflation kind of they exclude the most extreme upside down and downside price changes in each month disaggregated data. So for the motivation for the trimming is that extreme price changes are often like biased because you look at one and because you look at one thing while neglecting others, and they are not very indicative of underlying inflation trends. So yeah, so that's one. And another reason that inflation of the low inflation or subdued inflation is regarding to the outputs of the workforce, whether it's large or small or negative during the global financial crisis. The inflation is still unlikely to increase much. For example, the book here referred to the Philip curve, and the Philip curve here reflects on the various factors like including globalization, automation, rising market concentration, and in the labor market, whether there's increase or there's or the outputs are not met in expectation, there's still not much increase in the inflation as well. And another one that we can expect is that the monetary policy to contain inflation from the government. However, one should keep in mind that the monetary policy should not be used to keep government borrowing assets low at the expense of ensuring price stability, in which in principle might increase in inflation. So for the correct example is the adoption of inflation targeting frameworks in the 1990s. So yeah, and mostly of the in according to the book during the pandemic, survey measures inflation expects have remained broadly stable for most countries, and these are the sort of the measures on how they can keep this sort of inflation low. So I think that's very much it for my part. So we can move on to the next slide.
And yeah, so move to the slide is which talk about the cross-border service trade expectation to remain subdued. And so as the recovery strengthened in 2021, the global trade is projected to accelerate to 8.4%, and mainly because of the rebound in the merchandise volume. And cross-border service trade, like the tourism, transportation, is expected to remain subdued until the pandemic is brought under the control everywhere. And international travel restriction and travel fares are expected to have lasting impact on the revenue of the export service. And like you can see in the graph. So now we move to the next part.
Um, Thank you, Sikong, for giving me the floor. And now I'm going to talk about one overarching uncertainty and many risks. So the first uncertainty is the effectiveness of vaccines. As you've already known, new vaccines are being approved on an ongoing basis and offer a path to recovery. However, the uncertainty is whether the vaccine is effective enough against new strains of the virus. Delays in inoculating all parts of the world would lead to vaccine-resistant virus mutations. New outbreaks could start anywhere and anytime, and renewed restriction may be required to slow transmission. Moreover, uncertainty about the duration of the stop-go run, which is the lower or strengthening of restriction, makes other elements difficult to predict, such as the investment plan, the policy extension, and the extent of scarring. And as for the risk, there are two sides of risk, such as the downside risk and the upside risk. The downside risk refers to the disadvantages or something that could go wrong, while the upside risk refers to the potential benefits or the positive outlook. Next slide, please. So now let's talk about the factors of the downside risk. The first factor of the downside risk is pandemic resurgence. In the pandemic resurgence period, vaccines production and distribution delays could be a potential headwinds for economic activity. Excessive staggerings across different regions may trigger start-stop patterns in the response to re-emerging infections areas. And this will extend the period of social distancing and uncertainty facing households, firms, and policymakers. Moreover, if mutations outpace the rollout of vaccines, COVID-19 could become an endemic disease of unknown severity. And the next one is tighter financial conditions. A reassessment of market fundamentals, an increase in core sovereign yields, or a reevaluation of inflation risk could trigger a sharp repricing of financial assets. Risky asset prices could fall sharply, causing quick changes and triggering significant losses at major non-bank financial institutions. And higher risk premiums would generate financing difficulties for leveraged firms and households. A wave of bankruptcies could erode banks' capital buffers and constrain their ability to provide credit. Moreover, amid high and rising debt levels, vulnerable borrowers could face rollover risk, an issue that would be particularly severe for some emerging market and low-income countries. Tighter financial conditions would hinder growth prospects, and this could lead to further repricing of financial assets in a potentially dangerous feedback loop. And the next one is extended scarring. Even if policy actions have so far have prevented systematic financial crisis, the COVID-19 crisis could still lead to substantial and persistent damage to supply potential. And this may arise due to diminishing labor force participation, bankruptcies, and associated disruption of production networks. The next one is intensified social unrest. Social unrest still continue to exist, especially in countries where the crisis has exacerbated pre-existing problems. A longer crisis could intensify social unrest, which could damage sentiments and slow activity further. Recent IMF staff analysis suggests that food price fluctuations could play a key role in triggering unrest. And the next one is increased frequency of natural disasters. Natural disaster can cause many problems to livelihoods and economy. Due to limited budget, some small economies could experience large economic damage because of the COVID-19 pandemic, adding with natural disaster. Natural disaster could also contribute to financial stress, particularly in the insurance sector. And last but not least, geopolitical, trade, and technology risks. For this point, tensions between the United States and China, trade barriers to protect domestic workers, technological protections are happening during the COVID-19 pandemic. And these technological protections could actually lead to the medical supplies or COVID-19 related pharmaceuticals advances protection that would impede the global supplies of vaccines. And on the other hand, there are three upside risks. Next slide, please. So the first factor of the upside risk is expedited vaccines production and rollout. So as you already know that many vaccines have been approved currently, especially the Sinovac, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson that do not require cold chain low temperature storage or can be administered in one jab. As vulnerable population are vaccinated and hospitalization rates decline, the fear of becoming infected could rapidly disappear. And improved consumer sentiments would boost services consumptions, lead to more front loading of investment, and lift growth above the baseline. And the next point is unanticipated larger effects from fiscal support. Back please. Yes, and unanticipated larger effects from fiscal support. So the fiscal support as part of policies maker respond to the pandemic has been remarkably strong and could have larger effects than projected. Moreover, advanced economies may still have untapped fiscal space that could be used to engineer a much stronger recovery, minimize the extent of scarring, and accelerate a shift to lower carbon dependence. And the last point, which is the coordinated policies. Monetary and fiscal policies came out strong and synchronized in the early phase of the pandemic. Therefore, if international coordination on active policies is maintained in the later phase of the recovery, a better than expected recovery could occur. Moreover, intensified cooperation on vaccination could accelerate the production and distribution of vaccines and the pandemic sooner than expected and limit the extent of scarring. So this is the end of my part, and I would like to invite my teammate to talk about the last part, which is the policy priorities.
And yeah, so now move to the last part of our group presentation, which is the policy priority. And despite an outlook that is unusually vary across country, the overarching objective of policy remain remarkable or uniform. Like the overall goal of the policy are very consistent. Like to overcome the immediate health crisis and the threat of climate change, so on. And the country need to like beyond this, the country need to limit the long-term impact of the crisis by limiting scaring, including from like the zombie farm and reduce inequality. And also the threat of the climate change, the bold action is need to limit emission, especially for the biggest polluter country. And so the strong international cooperation is vital for achieving this objective. And in terms of healthcare, ensure that enough vaccine are produced globally at affordable price and distribute globally so that our country can quickly and decisively fight back the pandemic. And also, the international community need to work closely to ensure the financial constraint economy have to assess the international liquidity so that they can continue the healthcare and other social problem. And beyond that, the issue that arising directly from the pandemic other countries should also work closely to readable climate change effort and resolve economic issues that underlying trade and technology tension as well. So this is the end of our presentation. And we have one discussion question for the group discussion. But before that, uh, yeah. So this is the end of presentations.
Okay, thank you very much, Group One, for very comprehensive presentations on the economic outlook of the world. We give projections about what will happen in the near future and also in the long term. I'd like to give a quick comment before I talk about the discussion questions. I have some comment for the group and also with a few questions for each presenter. So the first is that it's very much appreciate that you allow team member to have chance to make the presentation, and that's good. It reflects your cooperations and between the team members in coming up with these presentations. Let me go to some Nang part. In the part of Samnang actually talk about the multi-speed. I think he highlight a word called multi-speed. I'm not so clear what that mean. Can you explain me a little more?
Yes, teacher. After reading the book, I think a multi-speed here refer to the divergence of the recovery speed, including the speed in between country, between sector, trade and labor market.
Can you give some? I mean, speed for those things you describe. Just one thing. How they difference? So multi,
Yes.
I think maybe you're talking about variety, right?
Yes,
Variety
teacher, yes.
among countries.
Yes,
Some may be able to grow at 3%, some 2%, some 1%. Is that you're talking about this kind of speed?
yes, teacher.
Okay. The other thing I note in your part is that I saw, can you move to your slide in the beginning part? When you highlight about the cross-sector and cross-country difference. Yes, I saw you note you have, I mean, you have a blue text color and I mean the black. What's the point of highlight this thing? Are you intending to say something about the difference? Is it tourist industry or more severe or what?
Yes,
Can
teacher.
you
I
explain
refer
this? Yeah.
to actually it was highlighted red, teacher, but yes.
So
I
nothing special, right?
yes. I refer to the I highlight it here because it's negative, teacher. It get negative impact by the pandemic.
So you are saying that the let's say for example across sectors. So what is the impact of service and tourism? Why it's so severe comparing to manufacturing?
Yes, because the pandemic there is infection. If people get in touch, they will get infected. And as we know, the service and tourism, they will require a lot of the contact. We need to contact. Yes, people contact up with each other, such as the service. Yes, teacher.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because it
okay, I got the
require
point.
the contact, teacher. Contact.
So it's a contact intensive
Yes.
economic sector are likely to be severely hit, okay, by the COVID-19
Yes. Yes.
comparing to the manufacturing, like the industrial production, right? Okay, yeah, thank you, Samna. Let me
Yes,
go
teacher.
to Dalia part. Yes, I saw you. Well, it is not a question, but I like to look at these charts. we have the vertical axis, which is the change in the composite manufacturing index, right? We can see like the industry represent of how good, how active is the manufacturing in that economy of each countries. Okay, and the stringency index, which is on the horizontal axis. Okay, can you try to explain me what is the thing we can learn from the graph? I mean, you have a blue one, you have a blue dot, and the red dot. What's the point of? I mean, it seems like they have two big cluster in the charts. What is telling us here?
So, from my understanding in the book, this graph represents two waves. The first wave is when the pandemic first began, like around the first quarter of 2020. So, it was way more sensitive, and the economic like have like lower development, and um the other wave is when the country or when the society is getting used to this pandemic, and it getting less sensitive toward
Okay,
the
yeah,
pandemic.
that's okay. It's quite a complicated question. That's okay. Okay, but anyway, that's good. You try to explain that. So we see in the chart. Okay, you're looking at the horizontal axis. It called the stringency index. This is talking about how you impose the I mean lockdowns, something that prevent from people to move from one location to other, right? So we have two time period for comparisons. The one is from January 1st to April, which is the red dot. You can see it's cluster of this country. That is from January to April, and the blue is the from October to December. Okay, so you can see if you're looking that if we're looking from January to April, we can see the fact that the stringency index is more stronger because country impose lockdown and something it severely negatively affects on the productions. A negative decline you see in the production manufacturing. However, during the October to December, there's some improvement. You can see all the countries seem to move up. Some even move above zero. See, so there are some improvement in the manufacturing, the industry, the economy, and the stringency have been moving toward zero. I mean, less severe because countries start to reopen, okay, and they allow for mobility. So that's the message you can see from this. It's complicated, but it's you try to explain that's okay. The other thing I want to ask you is you have mentioned about the in the bullet point, you talk about the fiscal support, right? So the fact that maybe some country can recover fast, other country may recover slow, depending on the fiscal support. So can you, or is there, can you have any explanations in the text in the article? Where does the fiscal support resource come from?
So, based on the book and based on my understanding about fiscal support or fiscal policy, this fiscal support came from tax. So, in terms of United States and Japan, or mainly United States, they have a lot of tax, like that. Their tax is high, so they can use that tax to to contribute to their expenditure. So in any sector that is lack of, they can use those fiscal fund to contribute, so there will be balance and manageable. Do I
Okay.
answer your question?
Yes, that's correct. That's true. Because fiscal support actually mainly coming from tax that the government can collect from the taxpayer, but it can be other source. Uh, for the developing country, it may be quite challenging, and they may have to depending on the ODA from other countries or some other support from other countries or other international organizations. Okay, so tech is just one source, but it's one of the very important source. So financing like the cash transfer program, for example, in our countries, okay, we can do that unless you have money, okay, and maybe coming from tax, coming from your saving, government saving, or maybe from the support from other countries and other international organizations. Okay, that's anyway. Thank you, Dalia. I don't have comment for Moni, but I have a quick remark for Piro B, right? Do I pronounce your correctly?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
I note in the chat when you talk about inflations, can you see in the year 2009, right?
Yes,
It seems like I see there's a drop in the, I see the inflation is not much, it's below 5%. But what we can see is in 2009, it seemed like it became negative,
Yes.
right? Around -1%. What does that mean?
It is because it was during the recession time, right?
Yes, but what is the meaning of that?
The meaning of that is that what like do you want to like me to use one of the measure that the book mentioned to like understand this drop or just in general terms?
I mean in general, okay? What is CBI telling you, and what is that CBI become negative here?
Minus becomes so negative. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's okay. So you can see for other year, okay, the CBI positive mean the country experience inflations.
Okay.
Okay, except in the 2009, price actually become cheaper. I mean, they have deflations. Okay, so that's why it become negative. So the deflations. One of the stories that the crisis in the real estate sector in the US when they have bubble and real estate house cannot sell out, price drops. Okay, so that's called the deflation period. But that's okay. Okay, so inflation is you can see in the graph, it's not that high. Well, it's maybe below 5%. Okay, for most of the year. Even in the December 20, it's still below 1% or 2%. Okay, maybe it's still manageable. The last comment for Gum Ho and also Siêu Kung. I saw you talk about the I think the technology risk, right? Gum Ho?
Yes, lecture.
Can
Yes.
you explain me what does that thing mean?
So basically, as you already know, I think everyone here have discussed about this during last year about the intellectual property of the vaccine. So basically, the book actually mentioned that the risk here is that there would be the technology transferring would be not possible, and this could actually lead to a lack of the supplies of the vaccines because they cannot actually boost the production of the vaccines in many parts of the country of the world. So basically, yeah, it would cause a lack of the supplies of vaccines because there's no transferring of technology on the vaccine production.
Okay, I got it. Yeah, thank you very much. It's true. Okay, like you said, the issues of intellectual property and patents, which production of vaccines still remain in the developed countries, rich countries, could prolong the spread of the disease. We cannot end it sooner, and so the economic growth would have to be suffer for some long period. Okay, because if the rich countries still maintain their position of this pattern, okay, There's a lot of debate on this issue. So anyway, thank you very much, Kamo. So I think that's all for my questions and my comment. Overall, I think it's a good presentations. I can learn that you do put effort in coming up with the presentations. Can you move on to the discussion questions? Okay, so this is the discussion question from the groups. The question is, if you are a policymaker in the developed countries, okay, you can put your position like that, and what policy would you propose to your leader in order to recover the global economy from the COVID-19? Okay, so in other words, the group is saying that maybe the contribution by your countries, right, toward recover the global, not just only your country, right? It's the global economy, all other countries. So what is your thing you would advise? So for the class, would you have any keyword or key term you like to ask our presenter for clarification before I break you into room for discussions? Please mention it, so the group will explain to you.
Excuse me, like I have one question.
Yes.
So as we know that nowadays, the governments of all the country has put a lot of attention to the vaccine rollout. If everyone got vaccinated, so do you think that the economy would improve better than before?
Okay,
Yes.
that's a good question. You asking me, or you asking the
presentation? Like,
okay. Do you ask me or you ask the presenter?
the presenter.
Okay, presenter, please answer the questions.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you for your question. As I mentioned in my part, and lecturer also asked that why the tourism and the service sector heavily impacted by the COVID. Yes, it's because of the lack of vaccination to protect them from the virus. So the government take measure, social distancing, some lockdown. So that's why it impact and it somehow affect their income and the domestic economy and also the global economy. So when most of people get vaccinated, yes, of course the government will uh, cancel those measure lockdown and restrictions, so people will come back to work normally, and it will take some time to recover to the pre-pandemic level. Yes, thank you.
Okay, is that answer your questions?
Yes, sure, yes.
Okay, so true, like the Samnang mentioned, okay, the role of vaccine is quite important for, so the ability for a country to spread the vaccine, the faster they can do, maybe it's a good chance for them to recover faster also. Some of the country you can see in the region are still struggling, okay, to give vaccination for their people. Some even still below 50% of the population. So the more and the quickly, okay, they can do it, the more chance that they may be able to recover sooner by reopening some part of the economy, okay. So I think that's the question, but not the discussion question. So I think like you all answer the discussion question. So I think I like to split you into rooms. Let me see. We have 36 people, so I will put you into 5 rooms. Okay, and I will try to get our presenter into each room to support the discussion. So let me go to the breakout rooms and let me put you into 5 rooms.
So like before you moving us.
Yes. Any problem?
To the discussion, will one of do you hear me well?
Yes, yes. I will split you in 2 rooms, okay? And then I will tag the people in the presenter group to support.
After the group will okay.
Okay, so let's do it, okay?
Hello, like I was disconnected because my internet was slow. Can you move me to one of the group?
Okay, please wait a minute. I'm trying to do
Yes.
it. Okay, hello back everyone. Thank you sorry to bring you to the room. So for now, I'd like to invite each room to share your discussion result. So first, I'd like to invite room one. Room one, please. Can you share your discussion?
Hi, so we're from room one. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. For developed country, I think the most important thing is that developed country has the ability to providing loan to the developing country, and the loan can be with low interest, or they could suspended the interest for some period of time in order for the developing country to open their economic back up. And also they could providing some assistance to the IMF and the World Bank so that the developing country could use their loan from the IMF or World Bank. And for the vaccination, in order to boost the percentage of the world global vaccination, I think for right now the problem is that there are still a low production. The supply of the vaccine is still low, so there should be increase in the vaccine production, and it would be impossible for just country like the United States and China to be the only one that produce the vaccine for the global for the people around the world. So maybe developed country that have the ability to produce vaccine, they increase their production worldwide. Like they could cooperate in building more of factories or something like that in other region to produce the vaccine together in order to like increase the vaccine in other regions, such as in Southeast Asia or in Africa, something like that. And they also raise the awareness of the vaccine quality and vaccine quality, and also the vaccine equality in the other country domestically, so that the people can get vaccine equally and get the vaccine that has quality like accepted by the WHO or something like that. And also for the country that base their economy on tourism, I think there should be open border for tourists and decrease the quarantine period for the tourists that already got vaccinated, like from 2 weeks to only 1 week, something like that. And also countries should decrease the tax on product for imported product in order to decrease the price on the product, because like people are struggling financially, so it would help the people to like get the cheaper product, something like that. That's it from the room one.
Okay, thank you very much, Nita from room one. Next, I'd like to invite room two. Room two, please, can you share your discussion result?
Yeah, sure. So basically, our group and team one have the same chair. So firstly, we would ask our leader to provide more loans, to inject more loan to give to the developing country. So the best scenario is we will not take any interest from them during the pandemic period, and after the pandemic ends, they can start paying little by little, because in the future the loan will be repaid. And secondly,
we want to distribute the vaccine in large amount and as soon as possible to those developing countries. As you may know that once you get the vaccine there and a lot of people get the vaccine, there will be a higher chance of herd immunity. So the spread of COVID-19 will be less and the recovery rate will be higher and the country will open faster. And thirdly, we would like to give to share our experience and give advice and provide rather than financial assistance, we give material assistance like PP&E to support the frontliner and to take care of the COVID patient. Because even though you have money and you don't have the experience, the knowledge of the virus, you cannot take the money to cure yourself. So you need experience, you need material in order to support your health and cure them. That is all from our group, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Adam, for sharing your room discussions. So next, I'd like to invite room 3. Room 3, we have Richard. Okay.
So as I also agree with the previous group about like deploying the vaccination to the poor country as well as increase like provide loan and other stuff. However, I also have some idea related to what should the leader of the developing country do in order to recover their economic so during COVID-19. So like I think they should adopt the new normal policy like some of the developed countries, I guess like the United Arab and also Singapore, and just like they proceed with the economic the normal economic activity, but just make a increase the precaution, but don't make like restriction in trade or some export or import too much, because like developing and developed countries still depend on each other in export and import. And also for some part for the developing country in order to increase in order to make to gradually increase their economic again, they should like try to reduce the quarantine time. Just as like in Cambodia right now, they try to make the quarantine for the foreigner or other people for 14 days if they don't have a vaccination card, but try to reduce the quarantine time or make a repeat test and then allow them to stay in order that as foreigner would come to our country and as a visitor, maybe the tourism, the country that depend on tourism will increase dramatically. And we also suggested that try to open the specific travel destination and make some precautions so that still the economic activity in those countries still operate well. Yes.
Okay, thank you, room 3. So next, I'd like to invite room 4.
From our group, from our room discussion, we are similar to previous speakers. So from our policies, so first of all, the first policy we will propose to our leader, it will be the distribution of the vaccination. So basically, when the populations of a country mostly got vaccinated, the government would likely to be open up the economy. For example, in the case in Cambodia, since we have a higher rates of the vaccinated. So currently we are planning to open up the country in the November. And basically based on the IMF or ADB that I have read from the article, like with the higher rates of the distribution of vaccine, Cambodia will grow the economy to from 1%, from 1 to 2% in this year's, jumping to 5 or 6% in the 2022. And the second policy that we will propose is we would encourage our leader to provide the ODA to the developing country. It is basically there will be a contribution of the aid and additional fund in order to contribute to the third world country for their like it can be a training for the vulnerable job or position that are flexible in the situation right now that are needed. Yes, especially could be technology, digital money or something else related to the yes 4.0 industry world economy. Yes, that's for our discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, room 4. And lastly, I'd like to invite room 5 for sharing the discussion, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm representing room 5 for sharing our discussion result. So we think that in order to recovery from the COVID-19, especially for on the economic sector. So we think that we should each country should identify which is the main source of the economic growth in each country. We know that from country to countries, like different country, they have different uh, main source of economic. So, for example, in Cambodia, since the COVID-19 outbreaks, Cambodian government seems to put a lot of effort in to improve and in the agriculture sectors. So this is one of the way, and then we can see that the reasons Thailand revised its traveling measures for welcoming the international tourism. So this is also one of the way, because Thailand is tourism is play a quite important role for the Thailand economic. So yeah, so and then the second point is the official policy. So for the developed countries, so because since they are rich in they have a lot of money, in other words, so they can use the official policy to maintain uh, the the global economic, like how in any sector, so they can maybe put more effort on that sector, so in order to make it some kind of recovery and growth. Yeah. So the third one is quite similar to previous group, is that about the financial support. So they can support the business, and then especially they should have more financial support to the COVID-19 patients. And and then lastly, we think that each country should be more open up a bit. So I say this in terms of goods and service. So we think that during the since the COVID-19 outbreak, some countries each country is kind of protectionism a bit. I would say they don't want to yeah, the kind of protectionism, which is not good for a global economy, but it is a debatable topic, since they also want to protect their local uh, uh, business. Yeah, this is that's all from our group here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lee Ho from Group 5 for sharing your room discussion. Well, of course, I do agree with some of the point that our group have mentioned. Things like the support from the other countries, especially the vaccine, and mostly in the developing country, we cannot produce that vaccine, and we have to depend on the rich country. So such kind of vaccine quite important, and also the carefully policy support as well as reopen economy. Okay, I think all these points that you have mentioned correctly. Okay, correctly, and it have been implemented in many countries, including like our countries and other country like Singapore or Thailand. Okay, I think that's interesting idea, and nice to hear your discussions. So I like to end our discussion here. Okay, and I would like to say a little bit. I know we do have some problem because it's the very first time for our to have the group presentation, and also I'm not so, only just in 1 year the Microsoft team, they have changed a lot of tool in just like this whiteboard. Okay, and so I have difficulty in trying to manage that, and also the breakout room facility. But anyway, from this first time try, we can learn. So hopefully the next time, our next group presenter, we could do it much better. Okay, and also I think we take too much time because it's very first beginning with facility that come up with these breakout rooms. With that, I like to end the meeting here, and I will see you again next week. Enjoy your evening with your family and have a good day. See you again next time. Goodbye.